Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, along with me, Tim Dennis. And get away with that gravelly voice today, Tim. I had a long weekend in New Jersey, and my voice is shot. We did the New Jersey Para Unity Expo and had a great time. What an amazing turnout. And Tim, I gotta tell you, people love you. They were coming up telling me that they love you, they missed you, they wish you were there. So for those of you that attended and want to see Tim next year, make sure that you let the event coordinators know. That's the best way to get us hired to these locations. So if you want to see Tim at these conferences, I know a lot of them want to say, well, we're looking for TV people. Remember, Tim's on Paranormal Night Shift. He's also got Darkness Radio and has made other guest appearances. So we'll be around. And if you'd like to see one or both of us, certainly let them know. And Tim does a lot of fantastic talks. So we've got some cool stuff to work on when we get out to these conferences. But let people at the events know this is somebody that you want to see as a guest, because that's how they source it. When they see that there's popularity at an event, and somebody, people are asking for it. The problem is they'll ask the celebrity or the guest that's there, but forget to tell the coordinators. So the coordinators never know. So keep that in mind. I'm a lot more vocal than Tim is. So I'm always at these events because I'm pushing and letting people know I'm available. Tim's not as pushy as I am. So that's part of the reason he's not there. Make sure that you make a mention of him to bring him forward, and you guys will start to see him. And if you've had a chance to see him, he does some fantastic talks. He's always entertaining as well. So I just want to give you that heads up, Tim. People in Jersey loved you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
What was really flattering was I met probably about 15 to 20 people from completely other states, not like close states either. Like they drove 8 to 10 hours to get there. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I came here specifically because I listen to Darkness Radio and I love the Holzer Files. So that really, that warms my heart that they made this huge trek to, 8 to 10 hours. That's a long time to drive just to come to a convention. But it was a fun convention. They had 2 VIP parties. I got to hang out with ghost hunters and, Jason and Steve and Dave and Stephanie. They were all there. And then, we had Porter from the Wraith Chasers, Tennessee Wraith Chasers. And I bring that up because we're going to go into the Deep South here in a few minutes and start talking about Southern ghost stories. Kindred Spirits were there. The Ghost Brothers had a table right next to mine. It was amazing. And I got to see my baby sister. I haven't seen her since, I got to meet her, if everybody remembers the story, 2 years ago, just before COVID hit. I literally flew to Florida, met 2 of my sisters and my bio dad, and then COVID hit and locked down the world. So I haven't had a chance to see my sister again. She came out from Philly to visit with me in New Jersey, and I felt bad because I didn't have much time to talk with her. We just sat there. She was my professional photographer. She was doing all the pictures for us, Tim, and handing me cards to autograph. So it was great to hang out there and have this opportunity. And I'm glad so many people came forward to be a part of it. But lots of cool stuff. If you want to know where we're going to be, check out darknessevents.com. That's darknessevents.com for updates on the upcoming locations and such that we'll be a part of going from this year and into next year. We only have a few slots left for Ireland 2022 in June. If you're interested, let me know. We will get you signed up and take care of you. You can make payments. They actually think she has a monthly payment plan, so you don't have to do it all up front either. So if you're interested, just email me and say Ireland trip 2022, and I will forward the information on to Maria, the event coordinator. She'll get you the links and get you signed up. And again, Tim, just another quick reminder, I'm still on the road till mid-November. You can hear a vacuum out in the hall. I have absolutely no way to avoid this because I'm in a hotel in an undisclosed location. I'm filming our new TV series with Cindy Kaza. So you're going to hear weird stuff in the background from time to time, folks. I apologize for that, but bear with us. We're still here putting out content and making the show available to you.
As long as we don't hear a murder, I think we're good.
No, that would make this so much more exciting, wouldn't it?
Well,
right? Tune into Darkness Radio. Possible murder takes place in the background. I'm not sure.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not sure. Yeah. We've got some cool stuff to talk about today. My grandfather retired to Faraday, Louisiana, And I ended up getting to go visit him a lot. And I would hear all the cool ghost stories of Louisiana and Texas. And I had one of my first memorable ghosty experiences was visiting Victoria, Texas, when I went to go see my great uncle Charlie with my grandpa and my mom and dad. And my grandfather, we were in a kid's bedroom. My grandfather slept on one bed. I slept on the other. And he snored like a chainsaw going through glass bottles, right? Loud snorer. And I was not sleeping well that night. Well, as I'm laying there, I'm facing the wall and had my back to the door. And there was just enough light coming through that you could see like the faint gray outline on the wall in front of me of the door frame. When I saw a shadow fill the door frame and I could hear my grandfather snoring, he was still sound asleep. And then I heard this voice go, "I'll go to the other side to get David." And it was none of the people I knew. Ooh. It wasn't my mom and dad's voice. It wasn't my grandfather. He was snoring. And it wasn't my great uncle or great aunt. And I was terrified, absolutely frozen in place. There was nothing more to the story. I never saw. I just saw the shadow fill the door frame. And then I heard that voice and then it was gone. That was one of my first memories. And I'd have to ask my dad how old I was. I think I was maybe 5 or 6, maybe at the time. But I remember that moment to this day. Absolutely terrifying. And, of course, my stepbrother Lee lives out in Murfreesboro, Tennessee area, and we've talked ghosts, and he loves to go out on these investigations with me. So we've had a great opportunity to hear this, but these stories are so rich and detailed. And I think we only got to do like 2 or 3 Southern ghost stories on Holzer Files, and I just can't get enough of them. Such an interesting history. Well, Allen Sircy is our host today, taking us through this haunted tour of creepy places. He has a brand new book that is out, and we've got a link for his Southern Ghost Stories books in our Darkness Radio shop, and it'll be on today's program guide as well. But he's got Southern Ghost Stories, Opryland, which just dropped. There's a bunch of other great books in the series, and I think we've got 5 or 6 of them up on our Darkness Radio page. You can always go to darknessradio.com. Click the shop or store button. It'll take you in. You can go to our Amazon page and see all of the true crime books, all of the paranormal books, everything that we've got right there in one place. Allen Sircy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Southern Ghost Stories. Working on Holzer Files, we, of course, because Dr. Hans Holzer was, in Manhattan, he really stayed a lot on the East Coast, and there were certainly enough stories. And you run into these similar patterns and themes in the kind of investigations that we were doing. Going to the South, it seems like it could be one of a bajillion reasons that there are hauntings going on. And it's really interesting to me because I love to dig into the history and understand the mysteries of what's going on. But when you start talking about Opryland and that whole stretch, are you surprised that there are so many people coming forward now with more and more stories? I know we were talking off air that you write a book and then they're like, well, why didn't you talk about this place? Why didn't you talk about that place? Is it amazing to you how many places are well-known haunts that nobody really talks about?
It's really strange, especially in Middle Tennessee, because down here, this is ground zero for the Civil War. You're talking about Murfreesboro, Tennessee. There were 3 battles. You had the Battle of Cedars, Stones River, and when Forrest stormed the square. So you have Civil War battles all over Tennessee. You have skirmishing, you have battles. It's Indian land. Native Americans occupied this land, 1400s. Then you had fires. Poor fire codes is the root of a lot of the hauntings in big towns like Chicago, New Orleans, happened in Nashville, Murfreesboro. Fire is also a big problem too.
So you get these type of stories coming to you. Now, do you actually go out and investigate some of these stories as well, or have you become like a librarian, a collector of tales?
A little bit of both. I mean, I like to research the history. I started out, the first book I did was Gallatin, Tennessee, Ghost of Gallatin. And out there, I started talking to people on North Water, and I come to find out North Water burned to the ground 3 or 4 different times. So every building's haunted. Typically, 2-story dwelling, you had the storefront downstairs, upstairs where the family lived, the shopkeep lived. And up there you have candles, you have stoves. Well, shoot, every building's made of wood. One spark lights the whole block on fire. They build it back with wood, it burned down again. It happened all the time. It wasn't until the mid-1930s when there were fire codes in Middle Tennessee. So, fire is really prevalent, especially in Gallatin and everywhere else in Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, that's funny, right? The location I'm at, which I can't talk about yet, they had a couple of major fires go through here, but they wised up pretty early on. The building codes became like you've got to make it all brick and rock. It took 2 or 3 burn downs before they realized that, hey, maybe we shouldn't just keep building our houses and buildings out of the most flammable substance. And there is a lot said to that because even though there might not have been as many deaths attributed to those fires, the consequences of tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild, tear down, rebuild, the anxiety, the love, the sweat, the blood and tears that were put into these locations as shop owners and homeowners, that leaves an indelible mark in these locations as well. So you're getting some of these percussive memories, if you will, that are taking place in all of these locations. Where do you find the biggest concentration of hauntings? Is it surrounding old battle areas? Is it surrounding locations of tragedy? What is your findings?
Well, battlefields, of course, naturally. It's funny, you mentioned Murfreesboro, where the Battle of Stones River took place. There's a park. Well, the park is only where 10% of the battle took place. Now it's all developed. So, I mean, going into that Murfreesboro book I did 2 years ago, I went down there to those businesses along the main thoroughfare there where they fought, and everybody has a story. So, yeah, I mean, battles, I mean, they fought in Franklin, Murfreesboro, Nashville. There's a lot of death and destruction. Like in Franklin, Tennessee, you have 20,000 Confederates, 20,000 Federals. You know, the Confederates march down the hill, meet them head on, and boom, there's ghost stories everywhere because of the lingering effect from the war.
Now, have you personally had paranormal experiences yourself?
Oh, man, plenty. I used to live behind a place called Traveler's Rest in Nashville. I could throw a rock and hit the house. Well, strange things started happening. My daughter said, I feel like something's watching me. So I hopped the fence and walked over there. I'm like, hey, is this, I live right here. Is these grounds haunted? Oh, no, sir. I can assure you nothing happens here. So I go to leave, and I see a lady in the period attire. She works there. I said, ma'am, I live right there. My TV goes off and on. Lamps flicker off and on. We hear things. Is this place haunted? She's like, oh, honey, it's so haunted here, but I can't talk about it. I said, okay, I get it. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of things I can't explain. And writing these books, I've got stories for days of things I've experienced and seen and heard, and a bunch of stories.
Why do you think there is such a resistance, especially in the South, for people to kind of embrace the hauntings as openly as it seems to be in other parts of the United States? Is it because of the high religious, the Bible Belt aspect of it, or is it because of the dark history? I know a lot of them are enslaved people and Native Americans. What do you think is the main reason for this kind of hush-hush secrecy?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's the Bible Belt. I mean, Nashville, it's called Athens of the South because the concentration for all the churches here. Just a lot of old people kind of set in their ways. But some we've kind of seen it recently, like with the pandemic last year. My cousin was a director at a historic house. And before the pandemic hit, they wouldn't talk about it. But once it happened, oh, yeah, let's do a ghost tour. Hey, come on, tell some ghost stories because they've got to bring in revenue. The Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's house, for years, they wouldn't talk about it. But now they're hurting for revenue. They have to do it. There's a place in Franklin called the Lotes House, right down the street from where the Battle of Franklin took place. It was a field hospital. They didn't really talk about it. But once the pandemic hit, they had to bring in revenues. They started offering ghost tours and letting you rent the building for investigations. And now it's about the money. These people realize they have something they haven't really tapped into, and now they're kind of finally going for it.
That was a funny aspect of working on Ghost Adventures behind the scenes for 4 or 5 seasons. We would help with these locations, and they were like, listen, man, the last thing in the world we need is that kind of attention. We're struggling already because, face it, not many people, aside from like school field trips, visit historic sites anymore unless it's ghost tourism. And I really had to sell that to these people. And I'm like, I'm telling you, from firsthand experience, I've watched organizations that were failing appear on Ghost Adventures or on Ghost Hunters or Kindred Spirits, and it reignites their business because now people want to come to hear about the haunting and the history. And some that gave in I still get emails. They're like, holy shit, Dave, it was 7 years ago. Can you believe 7 years have passed since I said yes to you? We have not let up. with tourism since that episode aired, which is so great to me that people are seeing the worth and that it's not just a money grab, but that's the best way to teach history.
Oh, yeah.
By tying it to the haunts, right? And letting people know, hearing from the ghosts themselves about the stories.
Yeah, it's funny. When I did the Gallatin book, this guy told me there was a place on the square where he had a psychic from Nashville come in because she heard it was haunted. Well, she walked in there. She touched the banister for the staircase, and she's like, I can't feel my right arm, and I've got a splitting headache. So I started digging, and turns out the guy who owned the building back in the 1800s was named Robert Sindel. He was a Confederate veteran who lost his right arm and suffered a head wound. So when you can tie it all together like that, that's a home run for me.
Right. Well, now, are there, obviously you've got the rich history of ghosts and death and war and murder and things that took place. But do you also have strange creature-like encounters? Are there demonic or elemental sprites, different types of stories that take place there as well?
Well, I guess it all depends on what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place called Cragfont. It was an old land grant from the Revolution. It's in Sumner County, Tennessee. And it's one of the first really big houses there in the area. And they say that there's a lot of rumors, a lot of hearsay, a lot of legends about what happened in that house. But the current caretaker, he looked at me and I said, it's demons here. And he said, you can call them ghosts, call them what you want, but they're demons. They're in this house. They've tried to hurt the previous caretaker. I've been in there and heard like a grenade going off in the basement. And then I walk down there, there's nothing wrong. So it's all in what you believe.
All right. Yeah, I just didn't know if there was, because of those levels of tragedy that took place there, if dark things seem to be drawn to that area as well, more mysterious kind of creatures.
What I've experienced, it's a lot of mischief. Mm-hmm. In Middle Tennessee, I can probably count on 3 fingers where something mean is going on, something really evil.
Right.
Most just mischievous stuff, letting you know they're there, pulling pranks, just let themselves be known occasionally.
Take me through this, if you would, with the type of hauntings. Are you seeing more residual style hauntings, those that just seem to play over and over where the spirits don't seem to know that you're there? Or is it a higher concentration of intelligent hauntings?
There are residual, but I think there's more intelligent hauntings. When I did the Murfreesboro book, Murfreesboro Spirits of Stones River, I told you I was out there where the battle took place. It's now all developed. I walked into this building. It's a CubeSmart. It's a storage facility. And as an African-American gentleman, he's telling me on the second floor, when I go up there, the sensors should pick me up and the light should turn on. But when I go up there, they're on and they turn off. He said, I believe it's a Union soldier that's trying to help me find freedom. He thinks I'm black, I need help, and he wants to help me. So I have a digital recorder there recording the whole conversation for the book. And when I get home, I play it back. You hear somebody giggling in the background, and he goes, he can't get around it. It's like they're just playing a joke on him because they're bored. They're not trying to help him. They're just having fun with him.
But so you do have a good mix then of residual and intelligent.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Let's, I want to hear some of the other aspects. Do you have any other personal experiences, things that you had? Obviously, you've heard a few things moving around, but what's probably the most impactful to you?
The coolest experience I've had, off the top of my head, there's a bunch of them. We were in downtown Franklin for the Franklin book I did earlier this year. And it's called the White Building. But before that, it was the Bradley home. It was after the Battle of Franklin, they marched them. Everybody came a mile back into where the square is, and every house became a hospital. So the Bradley home was a hospital. Well, in 1910, they tore it down, built a doctor's office there. And today it's 3 businesses. It's a Starbucks, it's a mattress store, and it's an eye doctor, an optometrist. Well, when I started working on the book, I was in Starbucks, and they're like, oh, yeah, we see a drummer boy in our basement. So the optometrist is telling me, hey, we saw a bugler in our basement. And the mattress guy is saying, there's something in the basement, but I don't know what it is. So I partnered up with Rutherford County Paranormal, Mark Walsh, and he brought a geoport, and we set up shop there in the basement. And we're just getting nothing. So I get on my phone, and I play the Battle Hymn of the Republic on YouTube, what they would have marched to. And all the lights go off on the EMFs. The geoports starts making noise. So after a few minutes, we go upstairs to the operating room or the eye exam room where a lot of things have happened. So we're up there and we're just getting nothing. So I pull out my phone, pull Battle Hymn of the Republic, and everything goes nuts. So finally, the lady who works in the building, she said, "Hey, what's your name?" And out of the geoport, it goes, "Drake." So Wendy said, "Hey, did you say Blake or Drake?" It said Drake a second time. So then she goes, "Did you say Drake?" And it said yes. So I'm thinking, well, that's 3 confirmations there. That's pretty cool. So I go home. I start researching Battle of Franklin, Drake, who was Drake? Thomas Jefferson Drake was in the 10th Ohio. He was a drummer. So if you go on findagrave.com, you see his picture and you see his drum that he played during the battle. So I can't say for sure that he was treated there in the Bradley home for his injuries, but it's just a lot of weird things there that point in that direction.
Here's the weird thing, though, right? Why would this spirit be drawn to this specific location or in the basement, especially if you know where they're buried and you know that history? Why do you think it's there? Did they build a home on that property where perhaps he once, was standing and was killed, or how does that work?
Well, the old house was torn down. He would have been treated for his injuries there in the house.
Gotcha. Okay.
They built that strip mall there. He maybe just stuck around, and that's where he likes to be. I don't know.
It's kind of tragic, right? To know that's, the soul still there, trapped, dealing with that part of the world and that part of history. And I wonder if they're still seeing aspects of their battles and their lives while kind of bumping into ours, if there's that double consciousness for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I met an empath a few years ago when I was working on the Gallatin book, and she told me that this is what she told me. The people, the ghosts or the spirits that are left behind, when they were alive, they were very spiritual. They were very religious. And when they died, suddenly, or just whenever they passed away, they felt they weren't worthy of going to the light. They felt that God would shun them, or they just couldn't get through.
Right.
They stayed behind, and that's why they're there. So I don't know, but I mean, that sounds kind of good to me.
Right. Well, if they were of the religious nature and they were part of a war and there is death, yeah, it does make you wonder, do they think, are these souls there thinking, I can't go on? I've partaken in murder. I mean, the Bible's pretty clear, and the people of the South had a very strong affirming belief in that at the time. I know I've spoken to religious leaders in the past who have said, oh, well, during wartime, it's a different thing. I don't know that to be true, because I never remember seeing that in the Bible where God's like, thou shalt not kill unless there's a war going on or something, right? There's no delineation line. Yeah. So to me, it's interesting to know why these spirits, if there really is just this religious dogma that they're still clinging to. But it's funny how many people go in and quote unquote clear the property and do these prayers, but then things don't really settle down.
Yeah, and I've talked to some other empaths. I talked to a lady in Murfreesboro who told me that she's gone into the battlefield and used that word clear. I've cleared them out. The other empath I alluded to earlier, I took her to Murfreesboro, where supposedly there were slave auctions on the square there in this basement is where they held them. And she and I went in there. And of course, I can't see what she sees. I can't feel what she feels. But my EMF meter was going nuts. So we were down there, and she's just shouting at somebody saying, "You can go if you want to go. I'll help you go if you want to go." She's screaming at somebody who's not there. And I said, "Well, what happened?" She's like, "She doesn't want to go." So that was a weird experience I had working on the Murfreesboro book.
Well, now the Opryland is the new book, right? Let's talk a little bit about some of the stories there, and then we'll jump around into each one of your books and share some of the other bizarre stories there. But talk to us and give us some of the history of that area. I know we tried like crazy for the longest time to get into the Grand Ole Opry, the original Grand Ole Opry, and they were not real forthcoming at the time.
At the Ryman or the Grand Ole Opry House?
I think the original site. What was that?
In downtown Nashville?
Yeah, I think that was the original site that we were trying to get into, and they were not having it. Neither of them were. Again, and at the time, I know when I was working for Ghost Adventures, it was because they have a high religious following and surrounding, and they just didn't want to upset any of their fan base at that point. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about the history. And I guess there's a lot of people that may not know that there were 2 locations of Opryland.
The Opry.
Well, of Grand Ole Opry, I should say.
Yeah, the Opry started in a studio there in downtown Nashville. It bounced around several locations. But the history of the property goes back to the 1800s, it was an old working plantation. And before that, it was Native American land. It's documented that when they were plowing roads back in the 1800s, they found Indian mounds and Indian graves. So it's just a lot of bad stuff all around. But the story goes, a lady named Mary Louise McGavick, she was the heiress. She was pretty much the last of the McGavick family. They're a prominent family in Nashville. Their cousins also owned Carton Plantation in Franklin, which was the oldest field hospital, or the biggest field hospital in the Battle of Franklin. But Mary Louise's family, once she died, she had nobody to leave the family to, or the plantation to. So what she did was she left it to her church. Well, after she died, her church, before she died, she wanted to be left to build a hospital or an orphanage or something, for people in need. Well, the church sold it within like a few months to a year after her dying. They sold it to WSM so they could build the theme park there. So as I'm writing all these books around Middle Tennessee, and you keep hearing stories, people tell me this, tell me that, but the one thing jumped out at me was a haunted theme park. That's like Scooby-Doo kind of stuff right there. At late at night, they're seeing an old
Right.
lady walking around. That's really cool and really creepy.
That is cool. So, but yeah, I didn't even think of that because of the history of that area. And then being a theme park, how much anxiety, happiness, joy, all of these different emotions are there, kind of adding fuel to the energy patterns of that land, right? And that if that's truly working like a battery, like many of the paranormal investigators out there believe, that could sustain a very long time of energy for these spirits to live off of.
Oh yeah, the Cumberland River runs right through it. I've heard theories about it draws from running water, and it's right there on the river too, and that's also Native American land. So it's a lot of things it can draw from.
Very cool. It's strange now because we're hearing about more and more haunted theme parks, like haunted theaters. I think, again, because people go there for a release. They go there for excitement, to have that scare of the roller coaster, to have those moments. And I really believe that, that lends itself to the type of hauntings that may take place. And, theme parks don't play up the deaths that take place there, but people do die at theme parks. And, that could be part of it as well, that you've got, it's a constantly fed battery, if you will.
I found research, and there were 2 deaths. There was a janitor who got hit by a roller coaster while they were running a test run early one morning.
Oh, my.
A kid from Knoxville visiting his family. He had a heart condition. He passed away on with roller coasters. So there were deaths in addition to Native American land and Miss McGavick. Now,
with that kind of tragedy, is his spirit still seen there?
Usually most of the stories are about the lady in white or Lady McGavick, Miss McGavick, whatever you want to call her. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, but they closed the theme park in 1997 and built a mall there. Mm-hmm. And the really weird thing is they see her in the mall. There's a gift shop, they're telling me, where things hop off the counter, and they find stuff in the floor, and they see things, hear things in the hallways at night. And it's right next door to the Opryland Hotel, and it's also haunted too. They see her in the mall, the hotel, just all the businesses around there have stories too. It's really crazy.
With that type of activity, are people seeing it during broad daylight hours? Is it only at night when security's closing up? What do you know about that aspect?
The stories are usually at nighttime when it's kind of died down. And it's kind of like what I've been learning from these books is if you're in a haunted building or a business and you work 8 to 5, the ghosts are going to leave you alone for the most part. Well, about 7 or 8 o'clock, you're working late, they're going to let you know that they want you gone. And that's when they appear and start acting up. So I think it's kind of the same thing at the hotel and the mall and the Opry House and the A-Cup House over there.
Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll have more Southern ghost stories to tell, and we'll bounce from your book to book and hear some of the most compelling, and I'd like to hear some of the more frightening stories that you've collected as well. We'll do that when we return. We've got a great show lined up for you. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. Today, our guest, Allen Sircy, as we dive deep into the Southern ghost stories right here on Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the program. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Tim Dennis along with me. Our guest today, Allen Sircy. Southern Ghost Stories, Opryland. That's the new book that's out, but he's written many books regarding the South and the strange stories surrounding them. So let's, since we're talking Opryland, what is one of your favorite and most unusual stories from the new Opryland book?
Oh, man. The Grand Ole Opry House really jumps out at you because it's such a prominent building. And that's, country music is synonymous in Nashville. I thought it was
with that. Yeah. What are some of the weirder stories, and are they celebrity spirits? Are we seeing musicians walking up on stage for that one more chance at the grasp of a spotlight, or what are we? Is it the Native American history, the enslaved people? What's the biggest stories coming out of there?
The Opry House, the stories are mostly Miss McGavick. They see the Lady McGavick around the Opry House, up on stage or over to the side, whatever. But a security guard also told me he hears like loud, thundering footsteps walking across the stage that he believes is a male. So the Roy Acuff house is right next door. Roy Acuff's a country music legend. He also lived on the property. And they say weird things happen in his house, too. They hear doors slamming, footsteps. I've heard stories of security guards running out of there at night because they hear noises they can't explain, or they're just spooked by the slamming doors at 2 a.m. So just a lot of creepy stuff over there at Opryland.
Do they, when they're on stage, do the celebrities ever see, we have First Avenue here in Minnesota, which became famous because of Prince, of course, and the Purple Rain movie. But there have been celebrities performing that have seen people walk up on stage that are there 1 second, gone the next, or, people hanging out by the green room. They've seen strange things like that. Do the celebrities ever talk about paranormal encounters while they're there?
We talked about the Ryman Auditorium. The original, or one of the places synonymous with Opry in Nashville. Whispering Bill Anderson, a country singer, he swore he heard Hank Williams Sr. there. Lisa Marie Presley claims that her dad haunts the Ryman. She heard him say, "Good job, kid," or something like that after she performed one night. There's just a lot of tall tales and legends.
It's funny, though, isn't it, right? She thinks he's haunting there. He's probably just with her all the time. He just was making himself known while she was performing at a place that he loved, right? Yeah.
And it's funny because he performed, I guess it was in the 60s or 70s, before he really broke big. And the manager there said, "Hey, kid, go back to Memphis, drive a truck." He said, "You have no future in country music." And he did. He was more rockabilly and rock, but still, it's kind of a neat story.
Well, he ended up showing his versatility doing all types of music, so in their face. But yeah, that's a funny little aspect of their history, right? All right, so you've got the Grand Ole Opry is pretty poppin'. What else in the new book, Opryland and that area? What's another one of your favorite stories?
Ernest Tubbs, also a very prominent country singer back in, I guess, the 50s. He was the first really musician who would travel from town to town with a tour bus. He kind of made that. He modernized travel for country music artists. Well, his tour bus is now, it's like it was a museum, it was a record shop, but today it's like a boutique there, kind of close to Opryland, right there, maybe half mile away, probably less than that. Well, his tour bus, they say that is haunted by him, Ernest Tubb. They hear people talking on the bus. People have heard their name being called in the bus. I've been in there, had some really weird EMF activity, but lots of stories about Ernest Tubb possibly haunting his bus. And as I was researching the book, turns out that when he was off the road, he couldn't sleep in his bed at the house. So he'd go back outside and sleep on the tour bus. So maybe there's a special attachment to his old tour bus.
Really? So just as well. And again, people don't realize how much time these celebrities and musicians spent on the tour bus and what kind of emotions and everything they poured into it, right? There was coming off the highs of a live concert. There was probably fights and squabbles between the band. There would have been, laughter and camaraderie, drinking, many different things that would have added to the element of energy that was aboard this bus.
Yeah, that was his home. He traveled for 20, 30 years, and that was his house. He had a home, but he was gone more than he was in his home with his family.
Yeah, that's the way most of them were, right? Well, still is. Most of these celebrities, the road is their home. And the they may have an anchor somewhere, but that'll draw them back in a few times a year. But that doesn't even really seem to bode well as their home. I was surprised to hear how haunted Loretta Lynn's house and property is.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories, but I haven't been out there. I was out there as a kid quite a few times, but since I started writing and researching, I haven't been out there yet.
Yeah, that's one I would love to get. I know we've thrown out invitations throughout the years to Miss Loretta to get her on the show to talk about the hauntings. But they're, understandably, they're like, well, she's very busy, and when she's not, she's very tired, and so we've always respected that aspect. I did get a chance to talk to Crystal Gale a few years back, and that's Loretta Lynn's, I think, half sister. Mm-hmm. And she was a delight, and certainly believes in the supernatural and has that element of paranormal in their world. So you got to love that aspect of it. Well, let's bounce around now. Tell some of the titles of your other books, and let's jump in and out of some of their more popular stories and freaky tales.
Southern Ghost Stories, Franklin, Tennessee is one I published earlier this year, and that was it's a lot of just the Battle of Franklin, where they fought there on Winstead Hill. The Confederates, 20,000 Confederates, marched down and took on 20,000 entrenched Union soldiers, and it was a bloodbath for the Confederates. I mean, the Confederates technically won the battle because they took the battlefield, because the Union retreated back to Nashville that night to get ready to go again if they wanted to go attack Nashville. But there's just so many men that died and just were seriously wounded there. And when the battle was over, they made their way to the square, and I think it was the soldiers outnumbered the citizens 4-1 that night after the Battle of Franklin. So all these historic houses, and a lot of them still standing today, where they were just old battlefield hospitals, like Carton Plantation, McGavick home. You go upstairs, you can see where there's it's like a big circle, and there's just red all around it, where they had a big barrel or a bucket there that the surgeons used for their tools or whatever. And as you can see, just blood just all by the windows, and it's pretty horrific still to this day.
And the spirits that are inhabiting there, what kind of encounters do people have?
They hear footsteps. They see men. They see figures. I know at Carton they say there's a guy they call the General. They say there's 2 or 3 kids that run around. Miss McGavick, they've seen her peeking through the windows. A friend of mine said he saw her peek through the window around 2 a.m. He was there in high school just messing around, and he saw the curtain move back and saw a lady looking out at him. And they say that Miss McGavick still haunts that house. But yes, it's all from that war, man. You had thousands and thousands of soldiers that died in that bloody battle, and they're stuck and they're lingering around downtown Franklin.
That is absolutely crazy. Do you have many stories of things like time slip phenomena where people today, go into an old store and things seem out of alignment, and it's like they've stepped back in time, encountering people, and then they leave and find out that store has been closed for a decade. Do you have many of those kind of weird aspects?
I do have one that comes to mind. When I did the Gallatin book, Ghost of Gallatin, I was talking to a lady. She said that her mother was in an old folks home. Well, before it was an old folks home, it was a historic house owned by the Boyers family. It was a dance studio, and the family lived there for years and years and years. They tore it down and built a retirement community. And the lady told me she went to visit her mother, and she went outside to smoke. She looked back in to the first floor room where her mother lived, and she said, when I looked in that window, it was like I was looking at a house from like the 1800s. It was decorated differently, and it was just really, really strange. And I looked back, and it was about like it was. But for a fleeting moment, she saw like an old historic insides of a house through that window, and she couldn't explain it.
That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. Do they have stories, not only of course, of the battle that took place there, and I don't think people realize how young were some of these soldiers?
Oh, I mean, there's records of kids being 14, 15, 16 years old. I mean, they would try to keep them out at a young age, but yeah, they're like that guy, Thomas Jefferson Drake. He was a teenager in the Battle of Franklin. I mean, the Union was recruiting heavily. The Confederates, it was an arms race, and the men, they had to have men. It's really strange and complicated. The Civil War, it's not black and white like they teach you in school. When Fort Donelson, Fort Henry fell in 1862, the Union marched in and took Nashville. Then they went to the major hubs where the railroads and waterways were, like Gallatin, Murfreesboro, and Franklin, and occupied them. And when they were here, they took your cattle, took your crops, they'd kick you out of your house, In Gallatin, a guy named Leisure Payne, he would hang you on the square if you were related to a soldier, just get information from you. I mean, it's so complicated, the Civil War, and it ripples all through Middle Tennessee, and it explains a lot of the hauntings.
Are you seeing many tales of like entire regiments of fighters appearing, or is it more like one-offs, just one spirit here and there?
I mean, there are stories in Murfreesboro where like people will see, a dozen men, 10 men just walking through a field, and they'll just kind of slowly disappear. They say they see the same thing in Franklin.
I'd love to see that, but I don't know, as much as you love the paranormal and want to get out there and experience these things, sometimes the concept of seeing guys locked in battle eternally, right? This war that will never end for them. There's something heartbreaking about that.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's stories, people going to the battlefield in Murfreesboro and hearing musket fire and cannons at night. I mean, they're still fighting to this day. They can't escape it.
Makes me wonder if is it the fact that they're really trapped in this endless cycle of war that they'll live over and over and over again, which, when you think about it, and Tim, we've heard this how many times from mediums and psychics on the show, that when you die during your life's review, you sometimes have to live the life of the person or persons that you affected. So if you did negative things, you have to kind of live their life for a short time to see what it's like. Can you imagine in a war, your bullets are strafing, your bombs are going off and cannon fodder? Tim, I mean, it seems like maybe the reason this stuff is cycling through is all of these soldiers have to keep reliving it until they've realized what the true effect of war meant and reliving through these lifetimes over and over again. What do you think?
Well, not only to that effect, but also it could also be almost like I hate to think of it this way, but like a repetitive afterlife PTSD where you're trapped in a scenario that you can't get out of. It's almost like eternal fear, where you're in that moment and you don't know how to get out. And I hate to turn it into the religious here, but almost like a form of purgatory. You're in that place where you don't quite know how to get yourself out, because you're so in shock, awe, and fear that your animal base instincts take over, I guess, in a spiritual form, and you don't know to look for a universal light to go to, and you don't know how to maneuver your way out of it.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy, boy.
From Murfreesboro, there was a guy named Julius Goresh. He was General William Rosecrans' right-hand man. Well, the Confederates saw General Rosecrans up on a knoll, and they took a shot at him with a cannon. Well, they missed, but they hit Goresh, and they knocked his head clean off. And he rode probably 20 yards or so on his horse before he finally fell over and his body hit the ground. But they say to this day, they see a headless horseman roaming around that part of the battlefield. And you go on the square, they say they've seen a guy without a head walking around the square. So just a lot of real creepy residual effects from that war.
That's bizarre, isn't it? Then you got to think, well, he's still searching for his head. Is there somewhat of a spirit of his head searching for his body somewhere? You know, and I know that sounds almost comical, but is there, the other side of that story, that other part of the ghost story? Do people see, just body parts, ghostly arms, legs, heads, torsos in locations?
I've heard people seeing hands reaching out to them, but as far as heads or the limbs, I haven't heard any stories about that.
Very strange. All right. Well, gosh, and look, you've got so many books dealing with this. You talk about Southern Ghost Stories. Haunted Hotels is one of the book. What do you think is the most haunted hotel that you cover in that one?
That's hard to say. The Marshall House in Savannah, it was a field hospital. The Thomas House in Red Bowling Springs, Tennessee is a really cool place. There's a spring that runs underneath it. And I've talked to people who claim it's a portal. And they say there could be like a dozen ghosts in that house. You don't really know. There's a guy that they've seen him walk through the house in a horse. His kids run around. Gosh, Union Station in Nashville is a really cool place. It's an old train station. And the story goes that there was a lady who was waiting for her husband to come back from war, and he never came back. So she threw herself on the tracks and she died. And they say that I think it's room 711 is where she stays. They say all kind of weird things happen. And I found there's a lady who worked there told me there's a guy, they call him the porter. He's a young boy they see walking around and he plays tricks on them. Well, I found out there's a kid from St. Louis who ran away from home, or he was running away to St. Louis from Nashville. And when the police got to him or apprehended him, he took some poison and drank it and died there at Union Station. So you can kind of tie that to the young porter they see who plays tricks on everybody that works in the hotel.
All right. Now, with the hotels themselves, I mean, does it always seem to stem back to the wartime and the things that took place there, or are the residents or former residents still strolling the halls as well?
Yeah, it could be in some like the place I did in Louisiana, in New Orleans, the Magnolia House. It was an old house. And they say it's kids running around, and I actually heard them at 4:00 in the morning. So it could be people who stayed there or lived there. It could be tied to the war if they were a field hospital. I think every place is different. Different things happen in those locations.
All right. Now, I'm looking at some of the other ones. Gallatin, you said, was that one of your first books or the first book? Yes,
sir. It's the first real big one I did. Gallatin is just a really cool place where I told you a lot. It ties to fires, ties to the war. General Payne from the Federal Army, he was hardcore. Like, he didn't play around. He was sent there to protect the railroads and the waterways. John Hunt Morgan, a cavalry commander for the Confederacy, was making life hell for them. He's blowing up trains nearby Portland, and he was sent there to just lock the town down. Well, you get a lot of sympathizers, a lot of family members whose kids were fighting for the Confederacy, and I mean, he took a strong-handed approach. I mean, he would shoot people. He would hang citizens. I mean, he would arrest people, prominent citizens, send them to Nashville. And like right there on the square, just every building is haunted. And one of those buildings is actually Andrew Jackson's old law office. He practiced law in Middle Tennessee and Gallatin before he went on into politics. I've read the newspaper articles where he was practicing law there in Sumner County, and somebody tried to just flee the courtroom. Well, he went and got him, beat him with a stick, and took him back in the courthouse to stand trial. So Gallatin's a really cool, weird corner of the universe where a lot of strange things happen.
Are there many, I don't know what's the right term, famous ghosts? Will you see famous presidents or generals, names that history would recognize in a lot of these haunts, or are they the nameless minions that died for the cause of the rebels or the Confederates or the Yankees, rather?
I mean, a lot of them are just ordinary people. I mean, there's stories of Andrew Jackson still walking the walls or walking the floors of the Hermitage, his old home here in Middle Tennessee. They've heard him shout. I
actually had my friend's wife who worked at the Hermitage for a number of years, and she would tell me, she's like, Dave, I wish I could get you in here. And that was at the time they were not embracing the paranormal very much, back way in 2007, 2008. She would tell me the crazy things that would go on there. People would hear things, see things, full form apparitions that would move into one room and then disappear as they cross the threshold into another. She said that place was absolutely chock-a-block full of ghosts.
Oh, yeah. And back in Jackson's day, you didn't go to the hospital if you got sick. The doctors came to you. So, dozens of people probably died in that house. I mean, it all makes sense.
But on the battlefields, I mean, do they see the leaders of these battles marching their troops off to war? Or again, is it usually just and I wonder if the reason maybe the leaders aren't as well known or seen is because they felt they were doing God's work. They were, protecting land and liberty. And it might have been just the scared, teenagers and children and young adults that were going off to war that they left that scar. They're the ones that are still there dealing with this because they weren't as sure as the leaders of these wars what they were doing and if it was right.
I mean, you differentiate yourself from someone. I'm sorry, I kind of broke up there.
Yeah, you cut out for a second. Please say that again.
I mean, if you have thousands of men dying in a battle, I mean, a famous general like Nathan Bedford Forrest or somebody like that, I mean, they're not going to come out and say, "Hey, I'm Nathan Bedford Forrest. How you doing?" It's usually the spirits I've encountered are they just very playful or mischievous, or they're residual. It's very rare you get a name for one, or you can associate who they are with who they were. I mean, I got lucky that Thomas Jefferson Drake, and he was a simple drummer for the Union Army. So it's just, I mean, how can you really tell who's who when they don't really want to be known, but they kind of do.
Yeah, you're right. I've seen people on these battlefields engage with the spirits by actually getting the rosters of the men that died there and calling out to them, as though they're doing the roll call. And I've heard some crazy EVP, and gosh, his name is escaping me. Tim, you remember the guest we had on, John? Was it Seibold or something? Gosh, dang it. My mind's blank, but he went to Antietam and was calling out spirit names of these people as though it was roll call. And he was getting responses, and you could hear battles going on in the background and voices calling out their names as he would call them for roll call. It's pretty amazing when you kind of get into that supernatural archaeology. Do you remember who that was, Tim?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
Oh, it's driving me nuts. I want to say it's like John Seibold. If somebody listening remembers, please email me and I'll apologize for not recalling. But after 16 years, a bajillion episodes, names start to fail me as I get older here. Do you see that these spirits are more active when called upon, or it doesn't matter? They're there whether we want to engage with them or not.
Well, it's funny you brought that up. I was at the Stones River Battlefield in Murfreesboro when I was researching the book, and I had my digital recorder, my EMF. I was trying to just get some activity or figure out who's there. So I did that, like, "Soldier, what's your name?" And I would name some notorious generals. And finally I said, "Do you want me to leave you alone?" And the only response I got on my recorder was, when I said, "Do you want me to leave you alone?" He goes, "Yeah."
Wow. So let you know straight up, there's no plan. Yeah, if you could take off, that'd be great. Very cool. Well, what are some of your other favorite stories before we wrap up today? What are some of the more prevalent tales from your books that jump out at you?
Oh, man. Let's see here. I guess I can go back to the Ghost of Gallatin book. There's it's like an old shopping center. It's 2 stories. And on one side you had a dog groomer, and on the other side's like a boutique furniture store. And the lady in the dog groomer, she would say she'd bring her little boy in, and he'd come in the back door and say, "Mama, can I go play with the babies upstairs?" And his mother would look up, and there'd be nobody there. But that little boy swore he saw children running around playing upstairs. So a couple of days later, he goes outside, and he said, "Mama, the babies are playing outside today. Can I go see them?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? There's nobody here." So I was actually up there. I went to the top where that little boy saw the stuff, and I had my friend who's an empath with me trying to figure out what's up there. So we're about to leave. We're not getting any activity. And I told her, I said, let's go on. And as soon as I said, "let's leave," it sounded like a rock was being thrown at the wall, like maybe 20 feet from where we were. So we ran over there, and I was like, "Well, where's it at? I don't see it. I don't hear anything." And when I said that started happening, the rock sound started happening back where we were originally. Something was just messing with us there. So, but that dog groomer, she would tell me she would come in and find bare human footprints on this foam pad they stood on when they groomed the dogs. So you can imagine coming to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, seeing just a footprint in this mat where no one has been there since the night before. And, if the foam mat should have gone back to normal, in the 10 hours it was closed or whatever. But over next door, it's a boutique furniture shop, and the story there is a stencil. It's called the E stencil will come up missing all the time. And they'd always find it back behind this dresser. Well, the lady who owned it had a big wine tasting and painting party for some women. And she kept telling them, watch the E stencil. It usually disappears on us. So they took a break, got some more wine. They come back, the E stencil is gone. So they were gone for maybe 10 minutes. So she goes back to that dresser where they found it originally. That's where it was, behind the dresser. Well, I was back there last week, and I was talking to this guy, and he told me that they had a Pennywise picture they were trying to sell. And he would, in the mornings, find it in the floor. So he worked late one night, and he hung it back up. He went to the bathroom, came back, and it was in the floor again. So he put it back there on the wall. While back to the back, he heard a thud. something had cut the wire that was holding that picture on the wall, like with scissors, and it was back there on the floor again. So it's just a really cool little place in Gallatin that it's super active.
Yeah, that sounds like it. What kind of power does it have to be able to snap and cut wire?
Yeah.
Brandon, what are these spirits using?
I don't know. It doesn't like Pennywise, obviously.
No. Well, who does? Well, half of the planet, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Good ghost stories. Amazing stuff. Are you surprised by how many stories come to you after a book comes out?
No, I mean, this is Middle Tennessee, man. I mean, we have Native American history. We have the Civil War. You have slavery. I mean, it's crazy. I'll put a book out, and it's like for every story I have in the book, I'll get 2 or 3 others. Hey, well, how come you didn't put this in the book? Why didn't you do this? It's when I did the Gallatin book. I didn't put the courthouse in there. I'd heard rumblings, but every time I went there to talk to a judge or a deputy, they just throw me out and told me, "Hey, nothing's going on here." So I was at a book signing. A lady's like, "Hey, I work on the 3rd floor in the courthouse, and my door slams shut all the time. We hear footsteps." And I was like, "Well, where were you 6 months ago?" You know, it's just there's all kinds of stories, and it's in Nashville. It's everywhere in Middle Tennessee.
Are there many stories or many locations you've been to that are really just kind of terrifying, the types of events that still take place there?
Oh, yeah. Cragfont. I alluded to that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It was owned by General James Winchester. He, John Overton, Andrew Jackson founded the city of Memphis. His house in Sumner County in Castilian Springs, his brother was scalped by a Native American. I mean, they fought with Indians back and forth because, they settled here on a land grant, but the Indians didn't want to give up their land without a fight. So they fought for years before they finally made an uneasy truce. Well, once he got settled, he had built this big house. He had a daughter who had special needs. So he's a prominent individual, and in his house, he'd have visitors all the time, people out from the East Coast coming to the West that would stay with him. So when he had those visitors, he would take his daughter and put her up in the attic. And there's stories where he chained her or he just put her, I'm not sure what happened. But the story goes, he would assign a slave to watch her. Well, as she got older, that same thing occurred. He stuck her in the attic. Well, the slave got her pregnant. So legend has it he had the slave killed, and he killed the baby in his basement. And ever since, weird, bad things have been happening in that house. Oh. So the old caretaker, it's documented, the door of a clock fell over and cut his nose. I've seen security videos of books being thrown at him. It's just something is evil in that house. I told you I was outside talking to one of the gardeners, and I heard a grenade go off in the basement. And I said, "Hey, did you hear that?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah." I said, "I'll go with you, check it out." She's like, "Oh, honey, it happens all the time." It's just that house. It's just I told you the caretaker told me it's demons in there.
But you're hearing explosions, literal explosions in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think that is? Do you think that that's because it is working as a portal? Do you think that's like the opening of these portals? Or is it cannon fodder, something exploding there from the past? What do you think is going on?
I don't know. I mean, there's Indian mounds all over that area. There's a story of his daughter and the slave. There's just, I can't explain it, man, but I've seen the surveillance videos. And I've talked to people who work in the house, and just weird things happen all the time. And they've kind of really shied away from it, but now they're kind of embracing it because of the pandemic to bring people in there. But yeah, I remember I met a caretaker one day. He said, "Yeah, my first night I woke up, I saw a guy in overalls standing in my bedroom." So it's that common.
Very cool. Well, keep us abreast of the stories as they come out and what you've got going. It's amazing. I love all these books. I love that part of history. And let me frame that properly. Obviously, I don't love all the tragedy, but I love the fact that the spirits don't remain silent, that they demand to be heard. They demand that we recognize what happened there. And I think as long as there is strife on this planet, as long as there is racism and hatred and anger towards one another, these spirits will continue to cry out and live this horrible life, because I think that's their way of trying to stop the cycle, to let us know nothing good ever came from these type of wars, from the way that we interacted with each other or treated one another. And I think that's a big part of what history is trying to do. And maybe those souls will finally be at rest when we finally start treating each other as equals.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending some time with us. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on.
It's great. All right, folks, we will be back. Now, I know last week I said that we were going to do a live show. I ended up having to film, so I couldn't do the live show. My nights are kind of wonky, so it's hard for me to pull that off, but I'm going to try to find one that I can definitely lock in and do another night show. It might not be Thursday nights if you guys are open to it, and it's works. I think I might try to bounce it around on different nights of the week that I do have open to try to engage and do a couple of live video streams on our social media and YouTube platforms. So keep watching for that. I will update you. I'm sorry. I'm rescheduling with that guest as soon as we can to get back and have some fun. So thank you very much. We'll be back next week with more of the best in paranormal and true crime talk radio. And remember, go subscribe to Premium Stitcher and get to hear all of these programs commercial free, not just True Crime Tuesday and Darkness Radio and all of our archives, but you'll also get to hear all of the shows that are part of Stitcher Premium commercial free, and that's $5 a month. So small a price. And if you use code word Darkness Radio, all one word, Darkness Radio, you might even get some deep discounts for your first year. So go subscribe now to Stitcher Premium, or for those of you that don't mind the commercials, continue listening, and we thank you for that. Share the show. Let your friends, relatives, and neighbors know about it. Put up links for each episode on your social media. We would appreciate it. That's the way you can pay back your buddies Dave and Tim right here on Darkness Radio.